mean, I think you can say more broadly about the CCP. I mean, what are they good at? Are they financial wizards? Are they sort of, administrative wizards? No, but one thing they are very good at is character assassination. And that's one of the things that was sort of deceptive for me. Because when I look at, if you just look at typical CCP propaganda, it looks so on the nose and obvious. And you're like, who would ever believe that? But actually, seeing their persistence and the way in which they tap into the market they're going after, and what they did with Falun Gong in this respect, because you're absolutely right. That was actually a key component and remains a key component, is to convince the public that that Falun Gong is evil and twisted and deserves sort of what's coming to them. That was a driving principle of the persecution, which was not in place in the first year. And that's why Jiang Zemin in that first year had so much trouble getting the rank and file to fall in line when it came to persecution of Falun Gong. He actually had to do a tour among the provinces, especially in the south, after I think a year and a half in, because people were just not buying it. And that and a number of other things finally twisted a lot of the people to sort of go against Falun Gong. And I remember the day actually when that sort of sunk in for me, because I had gone to Chinatown a lot as practicing Falun Gong, and I had to shirt this at Falun Gong, and it was, people would say, hey, there's a Westerner come to Chinatown, they'd welcome you into their store, they'd be all friendly. And there was a time, I don't remember what the exact date it was, but I remember the look on her face when I was walking down Chinatown. I had a Falun Gong on my shirt, and same kind of reception. She came out, she saw my face, and she's like, oh, here's a Westerner in Chinatown, here's what we're selling, very friendly. She looks and sees my shirt, and the distortion on her face was immediate. It was like she just saw something horrid, and she kind of drew away from me, and then that was the end of the conversation. She went into her store, and that was it. And that was sort of where I realized they'd succeeded to some extent with the Chinese populace on convincing them that Falun Gong is something evil that they need to stay away from.
If I had to guess, it would have been after the because we did an episode on this, the Tiananmen self-immolation thing, that the CCP staged this thing in Tiananmen Square where they they basically hired some homeless people or mentally ill people to do a Falun Gong type meditation and then light themselves on fire to make it seem like that's something that Falun Gong did, which was kind of believable because there were Buddhists who had done that in the past, but apparently this is not it turned out it was not Falun Gong who did it, but because they broadcast it, then they got this footage of people setting themselves on fire. The party said it was Falun Gong, and they broadcast it daily on state-run media for a year or something, and then that
and
probably
it was
had
gruesome. It was gruesome. I mean, they had up close photos or video.
I've seen the video.
Yeah, I mean, it was
pretty gross.
Just awful. And I can see how, even if in the 90s, if you had family members practicing Falun Gong and you knew it was sort of this wholesome traditional Chinese thing, if you watch that kind of video long enough, it has an impact. And I think you're absolutely right. That was a key turning point inside China.
Yeah, I mean, if you had, for example, baseball players, and you stage something where a bunch of baseball players set themselves on fire or did something that seemed crazy, you'd start to think maybe baseball is leads people to this. I know that sounds stupid because it is stupid, but also it's really effective. And you say, the CCP is really good at character assassination. And they really did a great job of assassinating Falun Gong's character in China. And that's one of their incredible successes, is to take something that was widely regarded as a big health benefit thing. And then you go back to 94, 95 or something.
I remember seeing some documentary where they had a bunch of clips from Chinese state-run media that were praising Falun Gong, basically.
Yeah.
And it was, showing people doing these exercises in the morning in parks, and then interviewing people about how great it was. And then the state-run media reporter would be like, yeah, this seems pretty great.
Yeah.
It just, kind of mind-blowing in relation to what happened later.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is that the perception in China, whether it was people or state-run media, was super positive towards Falun Gong for most of the 90s. And then like by the end of the 90s or whenever early 2000s, it changed completely. And like it's crazy that people are like, this is just how human beings are though, but like it's funny to think that like we can just completely change our view of something based on what is like repeatedly told to us in the media.
Well, it's interesting. I remember having a lot of conversations with my Chinese friends when this was happening around 2003, and one of them sat me down one night. So we were going through sort of the propaganda stuff, and they pointed something out, and it was this footage of Chinese students being interviewed with the picture of the Tank Man, right, from Tiananmen Square, and they're like, "Hey, do any of you guys know who this is?" And every single one of them said, "No, not sure what that is." And the point of the news story was like, look how good the censorship has been. They don't even know what this is. And what my friend pointed out is actually, most likely, at least half of those kids knew what that was, but they knew not to say it. And his point was, what he made about Falun Gong is like, it's almost worse than making everybody hate Falun Gong. A lot of people, especially those who had family members or themselves had practiced, knew very clearly what Falun Gong was. But they also know they just lived through decades and decades of the CCP going after different groups. And when they go after a different group, it is horrific. A lot of people are going to die. A lot of people are going to disappear. They're so scared that they could be targeted, that they could somehow be wrapped up into this. They're willing to walk around and behave like they don't believe Falun Gong is good, even though deep down they do. And what you saw in China is a mix, and that mix changed over time. I mean, certainly there was a whole group of the populace that really were convinced by this terrible propaganda. It was like, oh, these Falun Gong people must be weird. But at least at the beginning, a larger population, most likely, is that one that was so scared, they just sort of like, yeah, that's evil. I don't want to touch that. And knowing, they're lying to themselves. They're living a lie. And then they're telling this lie to everybody else. And that's sort of really tragic because, what does that do to somebody when they have to walk through their life kind of like,
I mean, we all lie to ourselves, Levi.
I mean, I was thinking about this when you were talking about how you were talking about the leaflets and people deciding that they actually had to go back and explain the history of the Communist Party to people. That in a lot of cases, people in China, like, it is easier and to just believe when the government says you're a troublemaker, that you must have done something. Not necessarily that you were exactly what the Chinese Communist Party said you were or had done, but like you must have done something. And I think that is the thing that a lot of people cling to until it's suddenly them on the other end of it. Like I remember it was a New York Times story about a guy who had gotten arrested for making a joke on WeChat. In a private WeChat group with his friends, he'd made some kind of joke about Xi Jinping.
Was it a good joke?
I don't remember what the joke is anymore. This was like from like 2018 or 2019. And he got taken in and, detained for a couple months for making this joke on WeChat. And then he was like, when I came out, all my friends were like, you deserved it. Like, even though and he was like, I shouldn't have been detained for just like making some stupid joke. And they were like, but you should have known to not cross the line, to not cross the party, And I think that's something that people like think that like, well, as long as I don't cross that line, like if you feel like the people who got in trouble must be troublemakers, then you're like, if I'm not a troublemaker, I'll be all right. And I think this is also one of those things.
First they came for the troublemakers, but I was not a troublemaker. And that's the end of the story. No problem for me.
I was thinking the Shanghai lockdown had a big psychological impact on a lot of people because it was, it covered so much of society. And a lot of people who thought they weren't troublemakers.
Right. Like the middle class, even the rich, like in Shanghai, you're like locked down.
Yeah. And they were like, I didn't do anything. And suddenly I have no food in my apartment. And, this isn't right. So I think that that's one of those things that I think slowly you see that mentality in China changing on a grander scale as the Communist Party kind of targets more and more people. I mean, zero COVID everybody's more afraid of being quarantined than they are of getting COVID.
Pretty soon it's going to be zero colds.
Yeah, well, zero COVID is going to work just about as well as zero Falun Gong.
Not at all.
Which is to say, it doesn't work long term.
That COVID's just going to go underground.
Yeah, well, I mean, anyway, it's going to be endemic, but yeah, like eventually you're going to have to deal with it.